One of the biggest stories of the week, the arrest of the alleged Golden State Killer. Police say they caught Joseph James DeAngelo thanks to DNA sent to a genealogy website by one of his relatives. And Allison, using DNA to solve crimes is nothing new, but this is really putting a big spotlight on that.
Yeah, it definitely is, because this is a very high-profile case. DeAngelo is a former police officer. He's accused of a violent crime spree across 10 California counties during the 70s and 80s. The Golden State Killer wore a ski mask and left no fingerprints while allegedly committing more than 50 rapes and a dozen murders. But he did leave behind his genetic code. It was the last piece of the puzzle for Sacramento investigators. They extracted his DNA from decades-old crime scene evidence, then searched genealogy websites for matches. They got a partial match from a site called gedmatch.com. Then another DNA test confirmed it. It was a huge moment for investigators.
There are things about that journey and that commitment that each of us knew. The answer was and always was going to be in the DNA.
So we may have caught a serial killer, which is great. But once again, we are now talking about people's private data and privacy concerns. And this time we're talking about people's actual DNA. So Phil Buck has been doing some digging on this for us. Is this even legal, what investigators are doing?
Well, it depends upon the jurisdiction where you're at. I mean, in Maryland and Washington, D.C., for instance, it's illegal for them to do this. But it's been used by authorities here in Florida as recently as 2015, where investigators in Pasco County got a break in a cold case from 1992. Using this technique. It's called familial DNA searching, and it's similar to what they did in this Golden State Killer case.
Okay, so is it ethical then for these companies to be giving out this information to police?
It depends on who you ask, right? I mean, ultimately, if those companies spell out in their policies what they're doing in their user agreements, and they abide by those policies, then they can do whatever they want with that data. And if that sounds familiar, this is very similar to the conversation that we've been having about Facebook and their users' data over the last few weeks.
Okay, so what if I don't want my DNA being used in any of this?
I would recommend that you think very hard before you enter your DNA in one of those databases.
Maybe think about doing it at all. It's probably not a good thing to think about. Okay, what's the other side of the coin here? What are we talking about? Have we seen DNA, though, actually prove that people are innocent?
Absolutely, we have. In fact, we just reported last week about 2 people who were sitting on death row, waiting to be executed, and were exonerated thanks to DNA evidence. The difference in that case is it wasn't an issue of their privacy being invaded or authorities using this information that's been shared by these private companies. In these cases, it was an advocacy group that went in and went back and tested DNA from the case, the original case, in order to try to prove their innocence.
It is so interesting, and you really have to think, twice before you do some of these websites.
This is really opening up some interesting conversations.
Yeah, all right, Phil, thanks.